I'm Jessica Thompson, 34, a forensic accountant. I spend my days uncovering hidden assets and financial fraud in high-net-worth divorce cases, skills that leave little room for denial when the truth is staring back at me. The smell of lilies still clung to my black dress when I turned the key in my own front door and found it wouldn't budge. I pressed my ear against the wood, hearing muffled voices inside, voices that shouldn't be there. My husband David had been in the ground for exactly 3 hours. I tried the key again, slower this time, but the deadbolt had been changed. Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you're hooked already, a like and subscribe will keep these stories coming. The funeral had been a blur of condolences and casseroles, but this sharp bite of metal refusing to yield, cut through my grief like a scalpel. I walked around to the back patio, my heels clicking against the stone David had laid himself last spring. The sliding door was unlocked. Told you she'd be back soon. A woman's voice drifted from my kitchen. We need to finish before she starts asking questions. I recognized that voice. Sarah, David's sister. The same Sarah who'd barely spoken to us in 2 years, who'd skipped our anniversary dinner last month because she was too busy. I slipped off my heels and padded barefoot across the hardwood floors David and I had refinished together during our first year of marriage. The lawyer said the will reading isn't until next week, came a man's voice, Sarah's husband, Marcus. We have time. Time for what? I stepped into the kitchen doorway. Sarah spun around, nearly dropping the stack of mail she'd been rifling through. Her face flushed red, but not with embarrassment. With anger. Jessica, you're back early. From my husband's funeral? I kept my voice level, though my hands were trembling. In my own house. Marcus stood behind her, holding a cardboard box filled with David's things, his coffee mug, the one with the chip on the handle that he refused to throw away, his reading glasses, the small cactus he'd named Gerald. Personal things. Intimate things. Actually, Sarah straightened, smoothing down her black skirt. This house belongs to me now. David left it to me in his will. I've already had the locks changed, and I got rid of most of your belongings. They're in bags by the garage. The words hit me like cold water. I stared at her, processing what she'd just said, and then something bubbled up from deep in my chest. A laugh. A real, genuine laugh that started small and grew until I was doubled over, clutching my stomach. You think this is funny? Sarah's voice pitched higher. Your husband is dead, Jessica.
Dead.
And he left everything to family. Real family. I wiped tears from my eyes. Whether from laughter or grief, I couldn't tell anymore.
Oh, Sarah.
Sweet, stupid Sarah. Her face darkened. Excuse me? You have no idea what's coming next, do you? The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of rain beginning to tap against the windows. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, the box creaking in his arms. What are you talking about? Sarah demanded. I pulled my phone from my purse and scrolled to a number I'd memorized but hoped I'd never have to use. David was many things, but he wasn't stupid. And neither am I. I hit call and put the phone to my ear. Hello, Detective Morrison? This is Jessica Thompson. I need to report a break-in. Sarah's face went white. You can't. We have every right to be here. Do you? I tilted my head, studying her the way I studied financial records when the numbers didn't add up. Because the will you're talking about? The one that supposedly leaves everything to you? David never signed it. The phone was ringing in my ear, but I kept my eyes locked on Sarah's face as the color drained from it completely. That's impossible, she whispered. Is it? Tell me, Sarah, when exactly did David sign this will? What date? Marcus set the box down heavily on the counter. Sarah, maybe we should. Shut up, she snapped at him, then turned back to me. He signed it last month. The lawyer has it. Which lawyer? Thompson and Associates. I smiled, and this time it wasn't from laughter. There is no Thompson and Associates, Sarah. I should know. I've been tracking every financial move David made for the past 6 months. The rain was getting heavier now, drumming against the roof like fingers tapping impatiently. Sarah's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Hello, Detective Morrison?" The call had connected. "Yes, I'm at 1247 Maple Street. I've returned from my husband's funeral to find 2 people have broken into my home and are attempting to steal my belongings." "Jessica, wait." Sarah lunged forward, but I stepped back. "They've changed my locks and claim to have a will that gives them ownership of my property. I believe this will is fraudulent." Sarah's face crumpled, but not with sadness. With rage. "You don't understand. David owed us money. A lot of money. This house is the only way we can." She stopped abruptly, her hand flying to her mouth. "The only way you can what, Sarah?" I asked softly. But before she could answer, the front door, my front door with its new locks, burst open with a crash that shook the entire house. 3 men in dark suits filled my doorway, and none of them were Detective Morrison. The largest one, with hands like dinner plates and a scar running from his left ear to his jaw, stepped into my living room without invitation. Water dripped from his coat onto the Persian rug David had bought me for our 3rd anniversary. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't place. "We need to talk." Sarah made a sound like a wounded animal. Marcus dropped the box he'd been holding, and David's coffee mug shattered against the kitchen tiles with a sharp crack that seemed to echo through the sudden silence. "Who are you?" I kept my phone pressed to my ear, though Detective Morrison was asking questions I couldn't focus on answering. "Friends of your late husband," the man said, stepping closer. His shoes squelched against the hardwood. "He made us certain promises. Promises that need to be kept." I ended the call without explanation. Whatever this was, it was bigger than Sarah's pathetic attempt at theft. "I don't know what you're talking about." $47,000, the man continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "Plus interest. Your husband was very specific about the collateral." My stomach dropped. In all my years as a forensic accountant, I'd learned to read between the lines of financial desperation. David had been acting strange these past few months, working late, taking calls in the garage, checking his phone obsessively. I'd attributed it to stress from his construction business. But now, this house, the man gestured around my living room, was offered as security. "That's impossible," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I was remembering things. David's insistence that I not handle our personal finances anymore. His suggestion that I focus on my clients instead of worrying about our little household budget. The way he'd flinched when I'd mentioned refinancing last month. Sarah found her voice. "See? I told you David left debts. The house should go to family, not to—" "Shut up." The scarred man didn't even look at her. "This doesn't concern you." "Actually, it does." Sarah's voice was getting shrill again. "I'm his sister. I have rights." The man finally turned to her, and something in his expression made Marcus grab Sarah's arm and try to pull her backward. "You have the right to leave. Now." "We're not going anywhere." Sarah yanked free from Marcus. "This is my house now, and I want all of you out." The rain was coming down harder, creating a steady drumbeat against the windows. I could smell the dampness seeping in around the door frame, mixing with the lingering scent of funeral flowers and something else, something sharp and metallic that made my skin crawl. "Sarah," I said quietly, "maybe you should listen to him. Don't tell me what to do in my own house." She whirled on me, her face twisted with years of resentment. "You think you're so smart with your fancy job and your perfect marriage, but David never loved you." "Not really. He told me so himself." The words hit harder than they should have, cutting through the numbness that had carried me through the day. "What are you talking about?" "He called me 2 weeks ago, crying. Said he'd made a terrible mistake marrying you. Said you were cold, calculating. That you cared more about money than about him." I felt something crack inside my chest, but before I could respond, the scarred man stepped between us. "Enough. Mrs. Thompson, we need to discuss payment arrangements." "I don't owe you anything," I said, but my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. "Your husband signed a contract. We have documentation." "Show me." He reached into his coat, and for a terrifying moment I thought he was going for a weapon. Instead, He pulled out a manila envelope, thick with papers. Everything's here. Loan agreement, payment schedule, collateral documentation. I took the envelope with shaking hands. The papers inside were real. I could tell immediately. David's signature was genuine, the notary's stamps authentic. My husband had borrowed $47,000 at 30% interest, using our house as collateral. The final payment had been due yesterday, the day he died. This can't be legal, I whispered, but I was already seeing the loopholes, the carefully worded clauses that would hold up in court. Whoever these people were, they'd done their homework. Very legal, the man confirmed. Your husband was quite thorough. Sarah snatched the papers from my hands before I could stop her.
See?
I told you David was in trouble. That's why he left the house to me, to protect it from people like this. Give those back. I reached for the documents, but Sarah held them away from me.
No.
These prove David didn't want you to have anything. He knew you'd just sell everything and disappear. Sarah, you don't understand what you're. I understand perfectly. She turned to the scarred man. I'm David's sister. I inherited this house. If you want your money, you'll have to take it up with me. The man's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air. The other two men, who'd been standing silently by the door, moved slightly closer. Miss Sarah Mitchell. And this is my husband, Marcus. Miss Mitchell. The man's voice was perfectly polite. Your brother's debt transfers to his estate. The house is part of that estate. Whether it belongs to you or to his widow is irrelevant to us. But, however, he continued, if you're claiming ownership, then you're also claiming responsibility for the debt. Sarah's face went pale again. That's not. I just want the house, not the debts. That's not how it works. Marcus finally found his voice. Sarah, we need to leave.
Now.
But Sarah was beyond reason.
No.
This house is worth 3 times what David owed. We can sell it, pay off whatever this is, and still have enough left over to what? I asked. Pay off your own debts. She spun around, her eyes wild. What's that supposed to mean? I was remembering more now. Phone calls David had taken in hushed tones. Mentions of Sarah needing help. His insistence that family came first always. David didn't borrow this money for himself, did he? I looked at the scarred man. He borrowed it for her. The silence that followed was broken only by the rain and the sound of Sarah's sharp breathing. That's not true, she whispered. Isn't it? What did you need $47,000 for, Sarah? Gambling debts? Bad investments? Or maybe Marcus lost his job and you were too proud to ask for help the normal way? Marcus's face crumpled. Sarah, tell me you didn't. Shut up. Sarah screamed at him. Just shut up. The scarred man was watching this exchange with interest, like a scientist observing lab rats. Mrs. Thompson seems to understand the situation better than you do, Miss Mitchell. My name is Mrs. Mitchell, Sarah snapped. And I don't owe you people anything. David chose to help his family. That was his decision. A decision that cost him his life. The words hung in the air like smoke. Everyone in the room went perfectly still. What did you say? I whispered. The man looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. Your husband's accident wasn't an accident, Mrs. Thompson. He was supposed to make his final payment yesterday. When he didn't show up, the room started spinning. David's accident. The construction site. The scaffolding that had collapsed, crushing him instantly. The police had said it was a freak accident, that sometimes these things just happened. You killed him, I breathed. We sent a message. Your husband chose not to listen. Sarah made a choking sound.
No.
No, that's not. David died in an accident. The police said. The police said what they were supposed to say. The man's voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather. Your brother understood the consequences of defaulting. He chose to protect his family instead of himself. I felt the world tilt sideways. David hadn't died in an accident. He'd been murdered. Because of money he'd borrowed for Sarah. Money she'd probably never intended to pay back. You're lying. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Am I? Ask your sister-in-law about the phone call your brother made the night before he died. The one where he begged her to take you and leave town." I stared at him. "How do you know about that?" "We know about everything, Mrs. Thompson, including the real reason you're here." Before I could ask what he meant, the lights went out. In the darkness, I heard Sarah scream, the sound of running footsteps, and the crash of my front door slamming shut. When the emergency lighting kicked in 30 seconds later, Sarah and Marcus were gone. But the three men were still there, standing in my living room like they owned it. And in the scarred man's hand was something that made my blood freeze, a key I recognized because I'd had it made myself just last week. The key to my safety deposit box. "You've been busy, Mrs. Thompson." The scarred man held up the key, letting it catch the dim emergency lighting. "Safety deposit box 247 at First National. Opened 6 days ago under the name Jessica Martinez." My mouth went dry. The fake identity I'd used was bulletproof, or so I'd thought. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't." He smiled, and it was worse than his threats. "Just like you don't know about the $2 million you've been moving through offshore accounts for the past 3 months. The emergency lights flickered, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Outside, the storm was getting worse, wind howling around the house like something alive and angry. $2 million. I kept my voice steady, but my mind was racing. "You think I have access to that kind of money?" "We know you do. Your husband was very chatty before he died. Told us all about his wife's special talents. How you could make money disappear and reappear anywhere in the world." I felt sick. David had known about my side business, the off-the-books work I did for clients who needed assets hidden from vindictive ex-spouses or creditors. It was technically legal mostly, but it existed in a gray area that could destroy my career if it came to light. David didn't know anything about my work. Didn't he? Then how did he know about the Cayman accounts? The shell companies? The very specific routing numbers you use for your more creative clients? The room felt like it was closing in. David had been going through my files. My private, encrypted files that should have been impossible to access. "How long have you been watching us?" "Long enough to know that your husband's debt was just the beginning. You see, Mrs. Thompson, we're not just loan sharks. We're in the business of acquiring useful assets. And you." He gestured toward me with the key. "You're very useful." One of the other men stepped forward, and I saw the outline of a gun under his jacket. "We have a proposition for you." "I'm listening." What choice did I have? "You're going to help us move some money. Clean money that's gotten a little dirty, if you understand my meaning. In exchange, we'll forgive your husband's debt and let you keep your house. And if I refuse, then you'll join your husband. But not before we have a very long conversation about where you've hidden our $2 million. I stared at him. "Your $2 million? The money your husband stole from us. Did you really think we'd loan $47,000 to a small-time contractor without collateral beyond a house? Your husband was moving money for us, Mrs. Thompson. Our money. And when he decided to keep some for himself, the pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. David's late nights, his secretive phone calls, his insistence that I not look at our finances. He hadn't just borrowed money from these people, he'd been working for them. And he'd been skimming. David wasn't a thief, I said, but even as I spoke, I was remembering things. New tools that appeared in his workshop. The expensive watch he'd claimed was a gift from a grateful client. The way he'd started paying for everything in cash. Your husband was many things, Mrs. Thompson. But he was definitely a thief. The lights flickered back on, sudden and harsh. I blinked in the brightness, and when my vision cleared, I saw something that made my heart stop. Sarah was standing in the kitchen doorway, but she wasn't alone. Detective Morrison was behind her, his hand resting on a service weapon. "LAPD," he announced. "Nobody move." The scarred man didn't even flinch. "Detective Morrison, you're early." "Am I?" Morrison stepped into the room, and I saw something in his expression that made my stomach drop. "Mrs. Thompson, you're under arrest for money laundering, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit fraud." "What?" I stared at him in disbelief. I called you for help. You called to report a break-in. But what you didn't mention was the $2 million in stolen money you've been hiding. Sarah stepped out from behind him, and she was smiling. Actually smiling. I told you David never loved you, Jessica. He loved his family. Enough to make a deal to protect us. What deal? But I was already starting to understand. Your husband came to us 3 months ago, Morrison explained, pulling out handcuffs. Said his wife was involved in some shady financial dealings. Offered to help us build a case in exchange for immunity for his sister. David was working with the police? I felt like I was drowning. Your husband was a good man who got in over his head, Sarah said. When he realized what kind of person he'd married, he did the right thing. The scarred man laughed, a sound like breaking glass. This is touching, really. But there's just one problem with your story, Detective. Morrison's hand tightened on his weapon. What's that? David Thompson wasn't working with the police. He was working with us. And so are you. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's smile faltered. Morrison's face went pale. That's impossible, Morrison said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Tell me, Detective, how much do we pay you to look the other way? 50,000 a year? 60. You're lying. Am I? Mrs. Thompson, would you like to see the bank records? Your husband was very thorough in his documentation. Every payment, every favor, every time Detective Morrison here helped us clean up a mess. I looked at Morrison, seeing him clearly for the first time. The expensive watch. The new car he'd mentioned at David's funeral. The way he'd arrived so quickly when I called, almost as if he'd been waiting. You're all working together, I whispered. Were, the scarred man corrected. Your husband's death complicated things. But we're adaptable. Sarah was backing toward the door, finally understanding that she was in over her head. This isn't what David wanted. He just wanted to protect his family. Your brother wanted to steal from us and disappear. The family protection story was just his way of keeping you cooperative. That's not true, isn't it? Ask yourself, Mrs. Mitchell, why did your brother really borrow that money? What did he tell you it was for? Sarah's face crumpled. He said Marcus was in trouble. That some people were going to hurt him if we didn't pay them back. And did you ever meet these people? Did you ever see any proof of this debt? The silence was answer enough. Your brother was planning to disappear, Mrs. Mitchell. With our money, with his wife's money, and without you. The only reason you're here now is because he died before he could run. I felt something cold settle in my chest. The safety deposit box. David knew about it because he was planning to empty it. Very good, Mrs. Thompson. Your husband was going to take everything and leave you to face the consequences. Just like he left his sister to face us when he couldn't make his payments. Morrison was sweating now, his hand shaking on his weapon. This is all very interesting, but Mrs. Thompson is still under arrest. For what? Moving money that belongs to us? Money we asked her husband to move. The federal charges will disappear, just like they always do when we make a phone call. The scarred man smiled at Morrison. You seem to forget who really runs the city, Detective. I looked around the room, at Morrison with his corrupt badge, at Sarah with her delusions about David's love, at the 3 criminals who'd murdered my husband. And I started to laugh again. Something funny, Mrs. Thompson? The scarred man asked. You all think you're so clever. But you've made one crucial mistake. What's that? I pulled out my phone and held it up so they could all see the screen. It was still recording. Had been recording since the moment I'd walked into my house and found Sarah going through my mail. I'm a forensic accountant, I said. I document everything. The scarred man's expression didn't change, but I saw his hand move toward his jacket. That won't help you, won't it? Because I've been streaming this entire conversation live to a secure server. One that's already been accessed by the FBI. Morrison lunged for me, but he was too late. The front door burst open again, and this time it really was the police. Real police, with FBI jackets and weapons drawn. Federal agents. Everyone on the ground. In the chaos that followed, shouting, gunshots, Sarah screaming, I found myself pressed against the kitchen floor, my hands zip-tied behind my back. But I was smiling, because 6 months ago, when I'd first suspected David was hiding something, I'd made a deal of my own. The FBI had been investigating this particular crime syndicate for years, and they'd needed someone on the inside. Someone with access to financial records and the skills to trace dirty money. Someone like me. David's death had been real, and it had broken my heart. But it had also been the final piece of evidence the FBI needed to bring down an entire network of corruption that stretched from the docks to the police department to City Hall. As they led the scarred man away in handcuffs, he looked back at me with something like respect. "You played us all." "No," I said. "I just did what I do best. I followed the money." Sarah was crying as they arrested her for conspiracy and accessory to murder. Morrison was already making deals, trying to save himself by giving up bigger fish. The other two men were silent, professional to the end. And me? I was finally free. 3 hours later, I sat in my kitchen, my real kitchen, in my real house, with Agent Rebecca Chin, the FBI handler I'd been working with for months. "The recording is perfect," she said, closing her laptop. "We've got enough to put them away for life." "What about David?" I asked. "Will there be justice for him?" "There already is. Your husband's death gave us everything we needed to destroy their entire operation. He'd want to know that his sacrifice meant something." I nodded, though the grief was still there, sharp and fresh. "What happens now?" "Now you get your life back. The real one, not the one you've been pretending to live." I looked around the kitchen, at David's broken coffee mug still scattered across the floor, at the rain still streaming down the windows. Tomorrow I'd clean up the mess. Tomorrow I'd start over. But tonight, I'd grieve for the husband I'd loved and lost, and for the man I'd thought he was. Because the truth was, David had been planning to run. The FBI had confirmed it. Fake passports, offshore accounts of a new identity waiting in Costa Rica. He'd been stealing from everyone, the criminals, me, even Sarah. The only thing that had stopped him was a scaffolding collapse that might have been an accident after all. I'd never know for sure. But I'd learned something important in the process. Sometimes the people we love most are the ones we know least. And sometimes the only way to find the truth is to follow the money. Outside, the storm was finally breaking. The rain was slowing, and through the clouds, I could see the first hint of stars. It was going to be a long road back to normal. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. My house was finally mine. My life was finally mine. And that was enough.